One of the things that I really appreciated about your confession was there was no justification, no excuse. You just said, this is what I've been doing.
It's amazing how often the enemy can come in and you think you're communicating, you're saying one thing and the person's hearing something completely different.
Honey, here are some things that I'm willing to do to make this right, to bring health and healing into our relationship. So let's say the person that's listening to this is, all right, I'm going to confess this is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. What are some steps that help them get there?
Welcome to Hope Reforged, the podcast where we champion married couples from pornography addiction to a life of freedom, restoration, and unity. We know the road can be tough, but we're here to walk it together. It's time to break free from the chains of fear and shame. Experience Hope Reforged.
So, Angela, I have a confession to make.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. So, what happens when it is time for the spouse to reveal what they're into? Assuming, of course, that hasn't already come to the surface. If this is a hidden addiction that they are involved in, this is something that they have kept in the dark, and now it is time to bring it into the light and to expose it, because it is never a good thing to keep this thing hidden and then have it exposed. Everybody I've ever talked to who's had this addiction exposed for them is always a much worse situation than somebody who has brought it into the light on their own.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. It's so much more painful to have that, if I were to stumble upon that information, than to have you come to me and say, you know what, I honor you enough and I respect you enough to where you're worth confessing to.
Yeah. Yeah. So bringing this out and having that open, even though you've broken trust by having this hidden in the first place, bringing it to you and confessing it and is in and of itself a step of restoring some trust, even though it's also a process of confession of breaking it.
Tiny bit. Mm-hmm.
Still better. So, I mean, there's one of two situations people are in, right? Either they have managed to keep this hidden, right? And then, then it's a question of, it's time to come out and let people know what you're struggling with.
People being
your significant other, yes. Or, it's a situation where, it's already, you've been involved in this and now it's been exposed, right? And so that's not the best scenario to be in, because there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth at that point.
So today we're going to focus on the person who has not been discovered.
Right.
They have the choice still of confessing.
Yes. Okay. A much better situation to be in, to come forward with this information, even though that's a lot scarier proposition usually. Mm-hmm. You're always kind of worried that it's going to get discovered and found out. So how much better is it to bring it out into the light on your own willingly, I can say firsthand, yes, it's a lot better to confess to your spouse than for him or her to find out the hard way. Yeah. How much more shocking it is, how much more painful it is. We can get into that, but I think if the Holy Spirit is convicting someone and saying, "Okay, it's time to bring this out into the light," He's looking for obedience. He knows the right time, and so there's a lot of trust and faith that comes into play here when you make that decision to confess. There's a lot of faith in him that he knows what he's doing. Well, and really, it's got to be in the timing of the Lord. You have to be sensitive to what the Lord is telling you and be obedient to that, and not rely on your own strength, your own will, your own understanding. You don't want to do this in your own strength and your own will, and for the timing to be off. But if this is something the Lord is telling you,
do it.
You got to be receptive to that.
Yeah. And better now than putting it off months or weeks or.
Yeah.
He knows. He knows when the timing is right. So.
Well, if the Lord is putting this on your heart, if you're starting to be convicted about this, you don't want to wait, like put it off for another 6 months and start to build up this, well, it'd be better if I did this, or it'd be better if I did that, or the timing's not right. You talk yourself out of it, and then you're down the road and you're like, then it gets discovered and then it's a bad situation then. I don't think I've had anybody that I've worked with or counseled in this, not that I'm a counselor, but in the small groups that I lead, where they've been discovered, where that's been a good situation. No. It's always, crisis mode at that point.
No.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. So let's say the person that's listening to this is, all right, I'm going to confess. This is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. What are some steps that help them get there?
Well, some steps you can take. First off, if you have kids, you don't want them to be around necessarily for this,
when
right?
That happens, yeah.
Right. There could be a lot of emotion that happens. You don't want the kids like kind of, hey, what's going on? So
or interrupting.
Yeah.
They need to go have a play date with some friends.
They ideally, if you get a way to have them out of the house or a way to get out of the house and have them babysit or something, I would recommend you don't necessarily do this in a really public place.
No.
But if you've got a coffee shop or a park or someplace you can go, it's a little bit more quiet.
I think you want to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think even a coffee shop would be appropriate.
Well, I mean, go get a coffee and then go somewhere. I'm saying sit in a coffee shop.
Go for a walk or something.
Right.
Library. So I would say prayer is the first thing, honestly, before you get the kids out of the house or find the right location. Prayer for yourself, prayer for your spouse, but also if there's anyone that you've been able to share this information with, your situation, have them be praying. Have them be praying for your spouse to be open to hearing. But if there's any support that's available, make sure that support person or people know when you're going to confess.
Yep.
And there's some comfort in that. There's some encouragement in that. And there's some accountability of, hey, I'm going to talk to my spouse on Friday afternoon at 4:00. That they're praying for you at that time, but also there's the ability for them to ask, how did it go?
Well, and depending on where you are in the journey and what you've shared with people, you could even keep it generic. It's better just to have general prayer. Hey, I'm going to be talking to my wife about some heavy things. Even if you haven't shared with them what you're going through, if it's been really behind the scenes and hidden. Hey, I'm going to be sharing some heavy things with my wife. Please be praying for us. So distraction and, there's a lot of it's amazing how often the enemy can come in and you think you're communicating, you're saying one thing and the person's hearing something completely different. Right.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, okay. So let me explain it again. Yeah. No, I think that continues we continue to see that play
30 years of marriage. We're continuing to practice. Okay. Another part to make this successful, another piece to make this successful, we felt was to be prepared to implement safeguards. Yep. When you confessed to me, I was just kind of left hanging.
My safeguard was, let's get divorced.
Yes. That was your only proactive, if you want to call it that, step. So I felt like I was everything was just kind of hanging and just, oh my God, now what? So for the person confessing, it would be great just to have like a list of, honey, here are some things that I'm willing to do to make this right, to bring health and healing into our relationship.
Assuming when the person reacts that they're open to that.
I think you still, you just got to be prepared to have that ready.
Mm-hmm.
There could be a very negative response. Well, there's always going to be a negative response, I believe, but
the degrees of negative response.
Yeah. I have heard of some. I have met with a couple who one of the spouses was actually confessing, but inviting them to participate. And that was not the type of confession that was desired from the other side.
Right.
And so, there could be a surprise there. But if you're trying to get free from this thing, which is, why you're here, then I think it's better to have some safeguards ready.
So, but what do we mean by safeguards? We're talking about things like, have some research, maybe have a counselor lined up, not that you need to do that completely in isolation. Maybe that's something, where, honey, I found some resources here. We can look into these, or maybe go interview
Here's
some
a
people.
couple of people that we could talk to. Yeah.
If you've got a support group like a Conquerors group or something of that nature, where you can say, I found this group, I'm going to start going to that. There's resources there. That would be helpful. And then, obviously the main way to access the pornography nowadays is on all the electronic devices we have. So doing some research into, how do we protect those devices so the pornography is not accessible anymore. So I can put some safeguards in place on that. Those are the sort of things that we're talking about. If you've got the time, if the Lord isn't saying, I want you to do this tonight, when you got to be responsive to that. When the Lord says it's time to confess, you got to
do it.
Yeah. Don't say, okay, well, I'm going to get all these things set up and everything before I do the confession. No, Lord says confess, go do the confession.
Okay. So let's say the moment has come. Mm-hmm. The kids are out of the house, or distractions are removed, whatever those distractions could be. One of the things that I really appreciated about your confession was there was no justification, no excuse. You just said, this is what I've been doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's important to be direct, keep it simple, not try and beat around the bush. Well, honey, if things, I know I'm into this, but if these things were different, if you were this or that, and then it becomes less of a confession and more a justification, right? And you don't want that.
The spouse may have questions.
Sure.
Another thing that I felt was really helpful was you just said, here's what's been going on. And whatever questions that I had, it was a yes or no answer. It was very, very succinct. It was, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
I just I wanted to get the whole truth. Give me everything that I'm asking for as far as information, so that it gave me some sort of, I don't know, not stability.
Well, you don't want an overload of information.
No, just answer the questions that are asked.
Mm-hmm. Be direct, be brief.
And I will say, I would encourage people who are listening, even if it's details that you don't want to share, just say it out loud, expose everything to the light that they are asking for. Now, I'm so thankful that you were not involved in child pornography, but that may be a question that comes up.
Sure.
Just honestly answer regardless. It just needs to come out.
Yeah. If she's asking a question, you're sitting there thinking, well, let me see. Did that ever happen? That's not, that's not a good thing. Yes or no.
Exactly.
If she's got more questions, you can go into detail.
I mean, there's a scripture, and I can't remember where it is, about, bringing everything out into the open.
Yep. Yep. You want to be honest. You want to be transparent.
Because the enemy has a foothold when there's darkness, when we have something hidden.
Yeah.
He will leverage that to the nth degree. Like there's no holds barred when it comes to Satan leveraging something that's hidden.
Today's episode of Hope Reforged is brought to you in part by C12, a nationwide mentoring framework of transformation for Christian business leaders. Find community at joinc12.com.
Let's talk a little bit about how the spouse may react, because there's no way possible to predict what this is going to be.
There's no way to control it.
There's no way to control it. The person is their own independent being that is going to have their own issues, and you could be walking into a minefield with this, or it could be something where they have, minimal reaction up front and it's very muted.
Depends on the personality.
Depends on the personality.
I know, like some personalities would just bury it and walk away quietly. There's others that are very expressive and might throw things.
Yeah, you probably don't want to do this right next to the kitchen knives.
Good point. I would say if it becomes abusive, that's not
Right.
not acceptable.
Right.
But the just not going in with expectations. So my reaction was highly unusual. I would
think so.
think I somehow, through the Lord, the Lord's strength, and I know he was there. Let me say that. I know that the presence of the Lord was there when you confessed to me that day. It was, looking back, there was no other explanation, because my flesh would not have responded as like I did. And it was from a place of strength. It was from a place of, no, we're going to fight for our marriage. I am not going to accept divorce as an option. And we're going to find help. we are going to come through this together. And then later I fell apart. But the Lord's presence was there. And so that's one of the reasons why we highly recommend that on Confession Day, that there is prayer covering. So, so I would not expect the spouse to react that way.
The way you do.
I mean, that was a freaking miracle.
So for people who haven't listened to our testimony before, how did you react?
Oh, I thought I already said, okay. I said, no, divorce is not an option.
Divorce is not an option.
We're going to get through.
We're going to get through it. We're going to, yeah.
I would say just respect the spouse's emotions. Let them process the way that they need to. It may take a long time for them to process, or they may say, get out of the house now.
Yeah.
I don't want to see you again.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to be okay with that reaction.
Honor and respect that reaction. The worst thing that could happen is to start arguing.
Right. You don't want to defend yourself.
No.
You're in the wrong here. So you've got to be able to let them react the way they want to react. Even if you think they're overreacting, if that's your opinion at the time, it's their situation to deal with and to face, and you can't control it.
The reality is, so the person that has been using pornography or whatever sexual addiction it is, whatever form it takes, they have been, for years or whatever amount of time, like you had been aware and struggling with it and praying about it and confessing to the Lord and all that for a long time. It's a total surprise.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not a complete surprise. It's a 90% surprise. I had hints here and there along the way. Again, we'd been married 4 years when you confessed. And so there were things that happened along the way that I kind of felt like it was in the background, but hey, it's behind us now, whatever. Well, for the confession, it's a punch it's a sucker punch. It's a punch to the gut. It's a complete, when you described how involved you were and how you couldn't get out, it was just like, oh, okay, this is real. But the trap door swings open for the spouse. I mean, it's a
Hey, look at the
shock.
monster I got in the basement.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, look at this alternate life that I've been living.
Right.
It's huge for the spouse.
Yeah.
So that's why we're kind of helping to encourage this could take a variety of forms, and it's going to need the spouse is going to need time to process.
Well, and just as, like the person who's working their way out of this addiction, right, is now, this is going to be, they say in most of the materials I've got, 2 to 5 years minimum to work your way out of this addiction. Well, the spouse is now also going to have to go through a journey of healing, of forgiveness, of, working their thought process through this betrayal. There's going to be an initial reaction, and then they may have to go back and just continue to revisit how they're processing all that over the time period that the other person's working their way out of the addiction. It's going to be like we said before, it's not a your problem, it's not a my problem, it's an us problem.
Hopefully the spouse understands that.
Hopefully, but
that's,
it doesn't always work out that way.
That's their choice,
Yeah.
their decision.
Yeah. It takes both people.
Yeah.
If you're going to stay committed to making the marriage work, if both people are open to doing that, which is not always a guarantee, then it's going to be work on both people's part. They're both going to have issues to work out of this. So it's a process.
And I would say if the spouse has been through a previous experience like this,
Sure.
previous marriage where their partner was discovered, or I mean that just adds to the hurt and the wound.
Well, you don't know
that they
what sort
received.
of maybe you do, maybe you don't know what sort of trauma your spouse has been through in their
Correct.
life, before you were part of their life. They may have things that are buried that, this hits on and triggers that could be really bad. Yeah. Trying to figure out a better word, but yeah, bad.
Just the damage. Yeah, it's insult to injury. So, and with 70% of men statistically being involved in pornography, 30-ish% of women, there's a high likelihood that a previous boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife has had this exposure, has had this impact on them before.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so
well, and it takes courage and bravery to face this, right? A lot of times you're just kind of like, you stick your fingers in your ears and la, 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 la. I don't really want to face this. I don't really want to deal with this. I don't want to talk about this, and what the Lord has for us all is healing in a better place. You can sit there and you can, if the plate is broken and cracked, you can kind of sit there and pretend it's not, but what the Lord has is that restored, that kintsugai, that restored beautiful artwork, where that brokenness is highlighted and reinforced and emphasized as being part of the beautiful tapestry of our lives, and that God can then use us like he's using us to do this podcast now.
can we go back to the safeguards? Because I don't think we covered all that.
No, we'll need to cover that in a little bit more depth. I do want to mention real quick too, before we get on to that, if you're listening to this recording and you don't have a significant other, right? There's still going to come a time and a place where probably you're going to be dating someone, or you're going to be engaged to someone, and when at that point in that relationship does this come into light? Ideally, before you say I do, right?
I think it is important, even if you're not married. Gosh, the sooner the better. Again, this
Like the first date?
No, probably not the first date. Oh man, I don't know why she won't go out with me again. She won't return my calls. I don't want people to think that it's just an immediate rejection. It's, once the confession happens, there's again, Holy Spirit is going to lead to know when the timing is right. But, but the last thing that I would want to happen to a relationship, to a marriage, is for you to know that there's a problem and you don't tell the person that you're getting engaged to, that you're getting married to. That's not fair.
Sure.
It's just not. For us to kind of unpack our baggage to each other so that we can deal with it before we're married is really the wisest thing.
Yeah.
Premarital counseling, I'm a huge fan of that. We actually went to two different pastors for premarital counseling.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about it. But of course, at that point, I didn't know it was a problem, right? So I was in denial to a large degree. But at the same time, when we got married, there wasn't the internet. So, it was the internet that really kind of took that whole addiction and really blew it open for me.
Ramped it up, yes. No doubt.
With people nowadays, with the internet being out there, it's so much more of an issue and prevalent. I think as a spouse, you got to be almost willfully ignorant to believe that your spouse hasn't been exposed to this to some degree. I mean, like we talked about, the percentage is 70%. The odds are vastly in your favor that your spouse is to some degree struggling with this. So it's something I think that needs to be part of the conversation. Ideally, as you're whether you're in a marriage and you've never talked about this before, or whether you're dating someone and you're starting to build that relationship and you're building that trust and you're making the decision to move towards this may be somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with, and then you want to, as that strength and that trust is growing, you want to have some of these hard conversations before you make that commitment, I think. So
you mentioned making your phone boring.
Right. Yeah.
Is that like removing social media apps because pornography can be accessed?
Yeah.
So
there's, so myself, I'm not familiar with the Android devices so much. I've got the iPhones is mostly what I work with.
So sad.
Yeah, I know you're not an iPhone person or an iDevice. So with those, there are ways to block content, to put filtering on them. There's that scripture where Jesus talks about, if your eye causes you to sin, cut it out.
That's pretty extreme.
It's pretty extreme.
Is that what you're recommending?
No, I'm not. I don't think he was talking literally is the point I'm trying to make here. I think he was talking figuratively. But the point I think he was trying to make is you don't compromise with this stuff. If you've got a problem, it's better to take some extreme steps to cut it out. You don't compromise with it. You don't try and find middle ground. Get it out of your life to the best ability that you can. So, I mean, that could mean, I need to downgrade my smartphone to a dumb phone. There are still flip phones and other phones out there that you can get, if you just need texting and calling. The downside of that is you lose, some important apps. You may have banking apps or Uber or whatever on your phone that now you wouldn't have access to. That's important. So in those scenarios, you may have to think about, okay, I'm going to password protect my phone and I'm not going to have the password, to access the content blocking. So, it may be, I need to get rid of Facebook. I need to get rid of YouTube. I need to get rid of some of these things where, content is on there, even though that's not what the app is for. It's still available to access through those apps. And advertisements and stuff come through, even on my devices nowadays where it's just like, where is that coming from?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people right now will be reacting to what you're saying. Like, oh my gosh, I could never do that.
Right.
But what you're saying is wisdom. It really is wisdom because we aren't able to control some of the stuff that comes in front of our eyes. One of the things, this memory just came back to me. We used to be walking around a shopping center or whatever, and I would see someone, a lady walking toward us who didn't have much clothing on, and I would say,
Right. Or there's a lingerie store or something.
Yeah, I would say, Chris, look at 3:00, and he would, just to tell him look at the opposite direction,
Right.
And
Well, because initially it was, Chris, don't look over there.
Yeah, right.
And then what is the first thing you do? What? What's over there? What
I learned very quickly to tell him a direction to look the opposite way. Look to your left.
Going, what? Oh.
Instead of, yeah, right.
And then it would catch on.
Don't look to your right. He would
to
immediately look to his right. Yeah, I learned quickly. So anyway, yeah, that's just a little tip if you're out in public or on a beach.
Want to help your husband to learn to bounce his eyes is what we call it. Yeah.
Yep.
Because that you can't help that first look, right? Okay, there's something I probably shouldn't be looking at, right? It's that first temptation is not sin. What we say is, when you look away and then it's like, oh, I want another look at that, right? And that your eyes go back to that. Then that's when you're entering into sin and coming into agreement with, yeah, I want that.
Your eyes aren't bouncing off of it. They're lingering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Bouncing eyes is good. So.
And that's one of those things that those disciplines you have to start training yourself to do.
Phone, computer, iPad. There's some great, what are they called? Apps or whatever's, I don't know. Covenant Eyes.
Covenant Eyes is a resource. Yep.
They're not a sponsor, but we like them.
So Covenant Eyes is a way, it's accountability software that you can put on your device. So if you do wind up looking at something, it will notify the people that, hey, so-and-so has recently viewed this information. Here's a website they've gone to, not to like, hey, go look at this thing that they've looked at, but just to notify them, hey, so-and-so has fallen back here. They've backslidden. Maybe give them a call and talk to them about this. Maybe they need some prayer. So it's a resource that's out there to provide another level of accountability to a group, which is a really important part of the process of learning to retrain yourself and to create these new habits. So Covenant Eyes is a good one. I think there's a few other ones out there, but Covenant Eyes is probably one of the bigger, more well-known resources for that. It's not just, your iDevices too, but it's, your TV, cable subscriptions, things that you have access to, even some of the game consoles that are out there now. There's content on those. So
wow.
There's a lot of, we're just such a connected society now with the internet and with media. So it's something that you need to think through on several different levels.
I also recommend a movie called Sex Nation. We just don't realize how inundated we are. If anybody doesn't believe what we're talking about, just watch Sex Nation. I think it's a good documentary.
Mm-hmm.
The non-smartphone. So, okay. I feel like now that the confession has happened,
right.
So let's say the confession came out and your spouse is still willing to talk and interact with you.
Is on the page with getting together and moving towards a healthy relationship.
Is open to moving forward, rebuilding the relationship and getting help and healing. I would also recommend that there's an emergency contact. So for both the husband and the wife.
Mm-hmm. For support.
So at 2:00 in the morning, if someone is found to be back on their computer looking at things that they shouldn't be, or out at a bar where they shouldn't be, that their significant other can call someone and freak out on that significant other. Like 2:00 in the morning, I'm talking 2:00 in the morning phone calls. I've received those. I've made those calls. I have received those calls, and it's really important to have someone to just unload on.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, the person that's using sex as their crutch, if they are being tempted or if they're about to go into that place,
mm-hmm. Yeah, and those people can sometimes be hard to find. Not everybody's got that sort of support network or that sort of relationship with people around them. Certainly, with things like Pure Desire groups or the Conquerors groups, there's ways of connecting with those people there. If you're a lot of times in the small groups that we lead, it's not just I'm going to have a relationship with a leader, but it's also peer-to-peer. I'm walking through this with other guys who are also struggling, and those can be good relationships to forge and then people to call and help have conversation with. But the spouse also needs that sort of network in place too. I know that was something you didn't have very well in place. And there was not a whole lot of resources for the spouse when we were walking through this on our own. But I know it's something you would have benefited from greatly.
Yes.
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 So yeah, if you can find a network, not just for the person who's going through the addiction, but also for the person who's involved in the spouse that's, also dealing with betrayal and trust issues and stuff, to also have somebody to lean on and call. That's also very, very important as well.
Yeah, I think, we've been focusing this segment on how to successfully confess.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, as long as the spouse who is hearing the confession understands that they are important enough to have this brought out into the light, that the reason that the core reason is hopefully for freedom and restoration that they didn't know needed to be restored, but now they do. I think that's, and they feel like you're taking, I felt like you were willing to take some steps. Our first step was to go find a counselor after you confessed. And I think that is a huge part of the Lord just seeing, yes, this is stewardship that I'm looking for, stewardship of this relationship.
Right. I want to continue the conversation. I think I want to talk a little bit about what the process of walking out of this looks like. But I think we're probably at the end of this particular confession conversation.
Part A.
Okay. So I think we probably want to go to a part 2. And
sounds
do that.
Good.
So
yeah,
let's wrap this one up and let's get together again and let's talk through what the process looks like getting out of this addiction and moving forward.
Thank you for joining us on Hope Reforged. Together, we can break the chains of addiction and rebuild hope. To stay connected, visit us at www.hopereforged.com, where you'll find new episodes, resources, and support. If you found this helpful, please leave us a review and share it with someone who would be encouraged by this podcast. Until next time, persevere, lean into hope, and remember that restoration is yours.